read the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Different educators have gone through the verses of the 23rd Psalm. And when we think about the verses all together, it's been a journey very much like our school year. We've had our easy times in the green pastures, and we've had our quiet times beside the still waters. We've had our times when we needed our hearts and souls restored, and we've had our times when we doubted our career path. Yet, even in our darkest, hardest hours of teaching, God has been beside you, guiding and comforting you. He has been supplying you and your students with a table full of intelligence and love, more than you could ever share. Our students have grown physically during the school year, and we've helped them grow in their academic knowledge and moral character. When they're filled up full, it's time to finish our school year. We send our students off for the summer with a blessing, very much like the last verse of the 23rd Psalm, which reads, Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Because we're teaching from our homes, this last verse is especially significant this year. We've had to redesign our activities, and instead of traditional classroom birthday parties, we've had parades. Instead of art on the walls of our classrooms, we've shared art online, or placed art in our windows to be seen by the neighborhood walkers. How are we handling this transition from having the students near you in the classroom to teaching them from a distance? That last verse from Psalm 23 has been helpful to me in praying about the sadness associated with separation and the powerful love that nurtures from afar. Goodness and mercy are following your students wherever they are, and they are always dwelling in God's house. They were in God's care in your classroom, and they remain in God's care in their own homes. They are always in God's care, dwelling in his house forever. Because they're always cared for by God, the shepherd, your students are not your responsibility alone. They are also God's children. Release that burden of feeling sole responsibility and leave them in the hands of God, their forever shepherd, who is forever caring for you too. God is shepherding your children even when they are far from your sight. I had a powerful reminder of this over Easter weekend. One of my sons had recently purchased a tiny, lightweight sailboat called a sunfish, which is less than 14 feet long. He was able to sail it in 40-mile-wide Lake Pontchartrain the weekend before Easter without any problems, and so he was anxious to try it again over the holidays. Last week, I had been reading these verses from another one of David's Psalms, and I shared them with my son because I thought they were perfect for sailors. It's from Psalm 18. In my distress, I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even into his ears. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. Now this son is 25 years old, a young adult, who makes his own decisions. He's always been a risk taker, having jumped out of a plane for his 19th birthday, and he's been rescued by a basket from a black diamond ski slope. He's traveled throughout the world, and he spent part of his Christmas holidays this year sailing in the Caribbean for his international sailing license. The sunfish boat he purchased, however, was a much smaller boat than the one he sailed around the islands in the Caribbean. On Good Friday, he couldn't sail due to a wind advisory for small boats, so he went out Saturday morning. He couldn't use the Bonneville boat launch he had used the week before, since it was closed due to the coronavirus, but he was able to sail from the boat launch in Kenner. There was still a small craft wind advisory, but my son felt safe sailing anyway and planned to keep close to shore. The boat launch was empty, except for one other boat docked at the pier, while its owners were in the parking lot repairing their boat trailer. I waited on the pier with my husband, and my son's first attempt to leave the harbor was very brief. His keel got stuck in the seaweed, and he had to let down his sail and paddle back to dock using the keel as a paddle. Then he went out again, but it was very windy, and when he got beyond the breakwater, we couldn't see him anymore. We couldn't go out to the park area next to the breakwater to watch him because it was barricaded off due to the coronavirus. So I went up on the levee, but I still couldn't see him. My husband was on the jogging biking path, and he couldn't see him either. He eventually made radio contact with him, and my son told him that his boat had flipped and the mast was broken. Then my husband didn't have any more radio contact with him, and he still couldn't see him or the boat. I was still standing on the levee, looking, and I noticed a runner talking to the policeman parked in the entrance to the Kenner boat launch. The policeman sped off to talk to the 3 men in the parking lot who were still repairing their boat trailer. The men ran to their boat and sped away out of sight. Then there were lots of police cars with flashing lights going to park by the water. Then came the fire trucks and the sounds of the ambulances. I was still standing by the levee, and I had that sinking feeling that all these emergency vehicles were coming here because something had happened to my son. Is this what it feels like to lose a child? I stood on the levee and prayed with that one verse of David's psalm, which I had read to my son earlier. He took me, he drew me out of many waters. I ran down the levee and tried to look from the breakwater, but the police wouldn't let me go near, and they wouldn't tell me if they had found my son. I went back and stood by the pier and continued to pray. I kept thinking how this was Easter weekend, which is all about life and resurrection. It's about life that goes on even when you can't see a body in a tomb. It's about life that goes on even when you can't see a body in a tomb, or you can't see a boy in a lake. I was not prepared for my story to end like that, so I put my child in the Holy City. The Holy City is a concept in the book of Revelation, like the secret place of the Most High from the 91st Psalm, or like dwelling in the house of the Lord forever from the 23rd Psalm. In my prayers, I put him there, safe, as in Revelation 21:4, where God wipes away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain. That holy city is where I've always put my children when I worried about their adventures. I put this son there, safe in God, safe behind God's 4 walls, safe in God's care. And I remembered with gratitude all the protection this son has always experienced during his wild adventures. I felt great love for my son. He is God's gift for me. And I felt great love for all these strangers who were watching out for him too. We were all surrounded by love. We were all in that holy city, dwelling in the house of the Lord forever. We had arrived at the Kenner boat launch around 9 a.m., and it was now going on noon. The medics in the EMS vehicle in the parking lot near where my husband and I were standing were beginning to smile and joke with me. I sensed the mood was lifting. One of the policemen came over, and I explained that my son had gotten his sailboat at a bargain price off Craigslist, and he wanted to know if I was going to have him return the boat. I asked him, "You mean my son is okay?" That was the first time while I was waiting there that I got the official word that my son was fine. His boat had capsized in a wave, and he had bobbed for a while in the lake, trying to flip his boat on his own. The three men who were fixing their trailer in the parking lot were able to rescue him and put him in their boat. My son was wearing his life jacket, and he only had one little scratch from trying to flip his boat in the choppy water. His three rescuers helped him flip it, and then they all returned to shore, keeping their distance under the coronavirus rules as best they could. It turned out that the mast on the sailboat wasn't broken, and the only thing lost at sea was one of my husband's radios, but he has plenty of those. I'm sharing this story because it's part of the classroom of life where we all learn our best lessons. The goodness and mercy of the 23rd Psalm did follow my son. It appeared in the form of those three men in the parking lot who could quickly hop in their boat and go rescue him. Goodness and mercy appeared in the form of all the first responders who arrived quickly and were ready to assist on land. It appeared in the form of the good and merciful lessons learned by my son about sailing much smaller boats and about paying attention to weather advisories. And we all learned that we remain in God's house where there are no accidents and no sorrow and no judgment, where the shepherd forever embraces us with goodness and mercy. I'm ending with part of a hymn by Susan Booth Max Snipes because she sings of the shepherd's tender mercies upholding us all, our students, our children, ourselves, and the world without end, as expressed in the 23rd Psalm.
Tender mercies, oh, tender mercies are holding me. I can walk in love through the valley of fear, singing hallelujah when hope is deferred. The desert of my longings can't fulfill, but love fills all need and bids one to be still. Tender mercies, oh, tender mercies are holding me. Tender mercies, oh, tender mercies are holding me.